Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Do Good to Lead Well Through Crisis VIP webinar series. My name is Craig Dowden, and really appreciate that you took some time this morning, Thursday in March. So spring is just around the corner, and taking some time to hear from an extraordinary CEO. Really happy that you've decided to be a part of this conversation. And for those of you who are back again and have attended previous sessions, welcome back. Had Jim DeTurch, an author of Choosing Courage, a couple of days ago, had a really great interest just like today. So really happy to welcome you back. For those of you who are new to this program, just to give you a little bit of context, the why behind this series. Originally, I created the Do Good to Lead Well webinar series before the publication of my first Forbes book, Do Good to Lead Well, The Science and Practice of Positive Leadership. And one of the things I feel particularly grateful for is I have the opportunity to speak with, learn from extraordinary CEOs, best-selling authors, TED speakers, like Kevin, on a day-to-day basis. And what I wanted to be able to do was open this experience up to as many people as possible, create a community of learning and like-minded individuals who are passionate about, so how can we do good and how can we lead well in our personal and professional lives. Last year when COVID-19 came upon us, and we continue to figure out how to navigate through this extraordinary time, once again wanted to provide a platform for this. So over the last year, I've interviewed over 60 top CEOs, best-selling authors, and TED speakers. And I have to say, I'm so grateful that Kevin is going to join us this morning. He is no exception. He is the award-winning CEO of Calian. It's a publicly traded Ottawa-based company that focuses on innovative technologies in health, finance, and IT. He's been with Calian since 2011, and in 2015 took over as CEO and was recognized as CEO of the Year by the Ottawa Business Journal in 2017. An extraordinary statistic around the Calian Group is that they've had 77 consecutive profitable quarters. So when you think about that, that's almost 2 decades consecutive profitable quarters. So extraordinary business success. Prior to Calian, Kevin worked in professional services for over 30 years, including 11 years at IBM. I have to say that knowing Kevin, having the incredible good fortune of knowing Kevin, people will share, and you'll see this on the LinkedIn, anybody who followed the LinkedIn post on this, publicly or privately, people will share how much their decision to join and engage with Calian is really because of Kevin and his leadership and his philosophy. And he constantly looks for ways to serve others, including, like this morning, taking the time out of his extraordinarily busy schedule to share his insights on how to lead effectively with us this morning. So Kevin, without further ado, good morning. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. And after that intro, I'm gonna have to find a way to get my head through the door. Fantastic. Thanks for that, Craig. Maybe you can start every morning like that with my staff. That would be absolutely appreciated. So thank you for that. So great to be here. In all seriousness, great to be here. Great to be here, Craig. And congrats on all your success, frankly, and everything you're doing.
Oh, well, again, I welcome these conversations and love to have the opportunity to talk about positive leadership and how can we do good in our communities. And just for everyone watching, as you know, Kevin has kindly agreed to take questions. So this is your time to ask a top award-winning CEO in this country questions that you've always wanted to ask, and so a wealth of experience and insight and knowledge around how to lead. So before we jump in, because I think this is such a fast, can you give us a little bit of background around Calian, the Calian Group of companies, and then also what are some of the challenges, if any, in terms of having, because you're involved in a lot of different areas. So I think it'd be great for the viewership to learn a little bit more and what challenges that provides and opportunities.
Thanks. So Calian's a diverse company. We go to market with 4 distinct segments: advanced technologies, learning, IT, and healthcare. Now, I can tell you right now, you probably wouldn't start a company this diverse today. I often say if this was a call looking for new investors and I'm saying I'm going to be a global leader in ground-based communications, I'm going to be a global leader in national healthcare in Canada, I'm going to be a leader in learning and getting people ready for bad things, and I'm going to run IT and cyber infrastructure, you'd probably kick me out of your office and say, Kevin, go get focused. But after 38 years in business, that's kind of who Calian is. And it's been through just, harvesting assets that we've created as a company over the years. And when I came here and took an inventory of those assets, I realized, wow, we've got a healthcare company, we've got an IT cyber company, we've got a learning company, and an advanced technologies company. So where we could go from SiriusXM as a customer with our software and technology to Loblaws and health clinics, to the military and healthcare, to learning, to helping the men and women of our military get ready for deployment, to helping organizations on their IT transformation and digital transformation exercises or efforts. That's what Calian is, and so we're a diverse organization, and so I enjoy that as a CEO. I think it's something that it stretches me as a leader for sure. But I think today, in today's world, diversity is definitely a strength, and I continue to believe that's one of the unique differentiators for Calian as a publicly traded company, is the diversity of how we go to market.
So knowing that diversification, as you say, within, you're involved in so many areas, how did you approach that as you're going into this pandemic, which no one has ever, again, this is the first, and now you have different areas in which that you're involved. How did you approach that as CEO, and how did you get your senior leadership team to, talk about diving in into a situation? What was that like? And what has that been like?
Well, I think everyone, and anyone in this call, yourself, Craig, we all saw that coming. Remember late fall the year before, coming into January, we saw it, it was in Asia, then it's in Europe, and then it's in North America and in Canada. I still remember the day Ottawa recorded its first case of COVID. And so you saw that tidal wave coming. So as we were debating as a leadership team how to get ready for this, it gave us some insight to the fact that we need to be ready. And what we did, frankly, we became a customer to ourselves. We have an emergency management practice that helps organizations, do business continuity planning, helps organizations look at their, rehearsing their business continuity plans. So we created an incident support team, and they have been invaluable in helping us get organized. So March 13th, I still have that. My assistant still has that calendar, little flippy calendar on her desk, is still on March 13th, and she's going to frame that, she told me, because that weekend we flipped the company to virtual, basically, as most companies had to. And March 16th, we came back to work virtually for everyone who could be virtual, and a goal to obviously keep our manufacturing sites going. So it's been a journey, but I think for us it's been all hands on deck. It was just recognizing that we had to do something differently and treat it as a crisis. And I think so far, a year later, I can say I'm so proud of the team and how they've reacted, and we've been able to keep operating pretty well. So very fortunate in that context for sure.
Well, and not surprised, question right away from David, wondering that have been participating in these webinars and is curious, as CEO of a publicly traded company, do you think are there any unique characteristics of leading through this, or is it similar if you're not?
Well, that's a great question, because I remember coming out of our Q2 results last year, and our fiscal year starts October 1st, so it'll be most people's Q1. I talked to the CFO, Patrick Houston, and I knew there was a nervousness out there in the markets, in the publicly traded markets. If you remember the reset that happened on stock prices, right across Canada and the world after the pandemic became a reality in the US, in Canada, and then everyone digested the fact that this was going to be a long-term challenge for the globe. There was a major reset on share price for a lot of industries, and Calian got affected by that, there's no question. What we decided to do is be proactive with our communications with our shareholders. We actually decided to do a special shareholder call where we went out and talked about the state of the nation at Calian Group and the impact to Calian with COVID. And working with our business leaders, we were able to quantify our anticipated impact to our forecast, to our guidance, and then also give an update on how not only was it a challenge, but it was also a potential opportunity for us in the context of everything we're doing was being deemed essential. So we just wanted to ensure that the people weren't guessing on how this impacted the company. We wanted to ensure that the people were making informed decisions on investing in Calian or not investing in Calian, but basing it on fact, and also trying to get ahead of what we knew was going to be a bow wave of questions with regard to the impact of Calian moving forward. So I think we proved it, we provided much more proactive communication stance, and I heard from shareholders afterwards that that was very much appreciated. So I think you just got to continue to think about communications in these times of crisis.
Well, one of the things I love, and it's such a powerful lesson for us around, okay, that proactivity in communication. One of the top recommendations when you listen to top thought leaders, like, get in front of things, communicate, because in the absence of information, then people are going to make up information or assume the worst. So having that reflex of, so let's get out there and get ahead of that message and engage people in that dialogue, I think that's awesome. Another question, not surprised. Jennifer said, wow, we talk about how to navigate culture internally, and you're involved in a bunch of diverse areas. So how do you approach that culture integrity question within Calian?
You know, it's an interesting question, because in my mind we are a subset of numerous cultures. So we have cultures both from our geographical perspective. You know, we have operations in Europe, for example, Germany, Norway, UK. We have operations in Canada, but even right across the country in Canada, different provinces, northern Canada. And everyone comes with, you know, our staff come with a culture from where where we grew up and live is part of our culture. So what I've had to learn as a CEO is that journey to be a culture is probably not the right journey. What you want to do is align the company on values and what we have learned is core purpose. And culture, frankly, I think emanates from the leaders. So we are a culture of cultures. I think you got to recognize that. It'll never be a point where I can sit down and say, man, this company's all 4,000 people are the same culture. Like it's almost an impossible dream. However, being aligned on what makes us, how we operate as a company, our values, authenticity. You know, we did a poll of our staff we updated our strategic plan, and we actually asked our staff to define our values and, you know, teamwork, commitment, you know, it was, you know, integrity came out. And that's where it was like, oh man, as CEO, that was a proud day for me, right? Like integrity was our #1 item that came out, and I'm saying, holy moly, that's fantastic, and that came from our staff. So I think for those that are struggling with this, engage your staff, ask the question about what is it, whether you want to call it values or culture, and then also ask them a second question, why do we exist? And that core purpose statement has been very valuable for us in a diverse company. We help the world communicate, innovate, lead healthy lives, and stay safe. That statement has resonated through everyone in this company, and whether you're an older guy like me or a new recruit, everyone can connect to the why a company exists, not necessarily what we do. And I've been finding that that's been such a key element for us as a company to sit back and say, so why do we exist? It'd be easy to say as a publicly traded company, we exist to generate returns for our shareholders. And believe me, we take that seriously, and I do appreciate the trust we have of all the people who do invest in Calian. But to rally a team to the next level, it's got to be more than let's talk about our financial targets. It's got to be talking about what are we doing for our customers and how we're making a difference in the world. And I think that is where I tend to focus on versus trying to get this perfect culture, because I think the culture will emanate from that core purpose.
Well, and I love the point that you're making, Kevin, around connecting it back to values and then respecting individual differences and cultural differences, geographic. And so how do you manifest and what, and yet we're all aligning around those values. And the other thing that I think is extraordinary, and I can only imagine how rewarding that must feel, having integrity top of the line, and then going back to how I opened this, which is, you know, 77 consecutive profitable quarters. So those, what I think is so interesting about what you're sharing, sometimes businesses and business leaders, it's almost like, oh, well, do I sacrifice one in service of, and this is just such an extraordinary example, which is backed up by the research, which is those things go together so powerfully. So I love that you talk about that. And so what made the values for you? How have you been become such a values oriented and have learned the power of aligning with values?
You know, I was very fortunate coming to Calian, that the team that was here, prior to Kevin Ford arriving on the good sailing ship SS Calian, was there was a strong foundation in the company of values. There's no question. And so, I just want to be clear, this wasn't a Kevin Ford thing for sure. It was a great company. It had done all the right things. The 77 consecutive profitable quarters started way before my time here. And Ray Basler, who ran the company before, and others, and the management team, Jerry Johnson on my team. And there's just so many people that have contributed to where we are today. So I would say I inherited a really awesome ship as CEO. And what I've been doing is, I call it moving an ocean liner an inch at a time. So when something's working, what you don't want to do is break it, but what you want to do is evolve it. And what I've been trying to do is push, my little Kevin Ford push. I'm not a very big guy, but pushing that ocean liner as much as I could to where I think we could sail to, and creating that vision and purpose with the team. And I can tell you the culture element has been a key element of it with regard to that growth journey. But I can tell you that the challenge is not about taking Calian and rebuilding Calian. It's how do you evolve a company that's doing well and ensuring you don't break the foundation that it was built on.
That's so amazing, and as you were saying, continue to kind of push that forward and keep that top of mind. And how do we drive that connection to values? Andrea has a question, and was going to be one of mine as well. So love that again. Already answered. Your answers and insights are inspiring lots of connection with the audience. So what qualities do you think leaders need to navigate through crisis, and then also as we move out of the crisis, hopefully soon, or return to some normalized state? Where do you think leadership is heading?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I think as leaders, and I'm sure everyone on this call and yourself, Greg, I don't think I go to work every day saying in my mind, what do I need, how do I need to act today? I think if anyone who knows me, I think the authentic leadership, and I don't say that anyway to congratulate myself saying, hey, you're an authentic leader, but I've heard that feedback, and I tend to just ensure staff know that especially in this time, that I am also affected by this personally. I am working through this, the ups and downs, the whole kit. So it's okay for us to have these discussions about, man, this is tough. This is really tough. So I think authenticity, number one, is just being honest. Like, let's not try to paint this as all rainbows and unicorns. There's some challenges right now. Personally, everyone's dealing with some form of challenge, and myself, the family, and elderly parents, and it's just like, holy crap, this is hard. So authenticity, number one. Number two is, I think, though, as a leader, you also need to paint a vision of where we're going as an organization. So we could get really constrained on the short-term impact of this thing, and we're all frustrated by it. We're all tired of it. We're all waiting for this thing to break. What I did is I worked with my management team, and we updated our 3-year strategy. We called it Imagine 2023. So what I wanted to do with the team is, we talk about that still today, even though we're going through challenges, daily challenges with COVID, we keep talking about the future, where we're going as a company. What does this look like in 2023? So I think continuing to articulate the vision for the company is critical. So I always say a CEO or a leader is responsible for 3 things: vision, culture, and pace. And I think for us right now, keeping that vision out in the forefront with staff is very important. And then the last one, I think, is that empathy piece. And I know you're a big fan of this. We've talked before. I think your book talks to that, Greg, is that balance between accountability and empathy is something all leaders are struggling with, because as a publicly traded company, every 90 days, we go to the market with an update on performance. And I've been in publicly traded companies before, and it can dominate the discussion in an organization. What's the sales funnel? Where are we today? Where's our sales numbers? Where's our revenue? Where's our margin profile? So you need to do that. But in today's world, and especially with COVID, you got to be careful. You got to be recognizing people are struggling with once in a 100-year lifetime issues, and So you got to be empathetic. You know, you can't be yelling and screaming at people. You can't just be talking. Not that I do that, but it's important, I think, as leaders that they also have their listen mode on and are empathetic to the fact that everyone has something going on they have no idea in the background. So I call it that balance of empathy and accountability, and that's something I try to manage every day. And the last point I'd say is, frankly, just trying to be positive. You know, I can't, you know, if I sat down every day and came to work and said, "Oh, woe was me," and you know, the world's crazy right now. Let's all just be like, you can't be. You gotta have to be positive, man. You gotta keep injecting that positive energy in, and I think that's got to come from the leadership, even in your worst days. Your worst days, you've got to show that there is some positives here, and there is some things that you need to talk about besides COVID, about the positive things that are happening in the company.
Well, and I love your acknowledgement around, so yes, so we recognize where we are, and then it's equally as important to let's look to the future. Let's look ahead.
Yeah.
Where are we going? And it's interesting because conversations I've had with leaders around and talking with team members about, so where are some of the challenges? Now, what are some of the opportunities? So kind of providing balance as opposed to just in one and emphasizing that negative side. And I love, and there's a question which I'm thrilled because this is great. I love the comment around that you made around authenticity. And because one of the things that you hear so often through this pandemic, and a word that just has gotten louder, it's trust. How do I trust my leaders? How do I trust my organization and to do the right thing or to do what they say they will do? And I love your point around that connectivity between authenticity and trust. When we are who we are and we show up and we're transparent in that, that's the bedrock of creating a trusting relationship with the people around us. So I love that you made that point. And the question, Tara said, I love your comment around authenticity. And so the question is, like, sometimes I struggle with how am I too authentic? Like, any suggestions for how to approach the question of authenticity?
You know, I appreciate the question. You know, I think I've been very fortunate in my career to have my managers or my bosses or my leaders. I've worked for authentic leaders, and you know, I've learned a lot through that. And what I saw in those leaders was I could tell when they're having a good day. I could tell when they're having a bad day. I could tell when the pressures were coming from a high. I could tell when pressures were coming from below with issues and the whole kit. But I always valued the fact that there was no veneer on the leadership. In other words, it was authentic. I knew if I walked in if that person's having a good day or bad day. So I think the key thing, my answer to your question is, it's okay to potentially not look like you're totally organized, that you've totally got it all together, that it's, oh my goodness, I've got, you know, I've sat back and thought about this, and, you know, everyone get ready, I'm coming down with all my incredible wisdom here. I think it's okay to what I call think out loud with your staff. And with the COVID crisis, I created weekly informal checkpoints with my management team. Actually, not weekly, it's actually every 2 days, Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays, just no agenda. Checking in, how are we doing? What's up today? Anything we need to talk about today? And I think that authenticity allows your leaders to be authentic, I guess is my point. So it's not just about you being authentic, but letting your organization be authentic. Okay, how's it going today? Sue, my Chief Human Resource Officer, any issues? Sean, my CTO. I think just be yourself and don't put pressure on yourself. And I've learned that after 30 some odd years, like I think people value the fact that they can tell if you're having a good day, bad day. And I also don't apologize for not being perfect. You know, I can tell you, my wife will guarantee you I'm not perfect. But I think it's okay to recognize you're not perfect. You will make mistakes. You're going to make, some days you may say the right thing, the wrong thing, but it's all part of being a leader. And I think that's something we put a bit too much pressure on ourselves to try to be perfect, and we're not perfect. And I think if you recognize that and let your staff definitely, I tell you, whether you believe it or not, your staff know you're not perfect. So just work with them on that for sure.
Well, and I love that you make the point around apology. and being that authentic. And then we are all gonna make, we are all imperfect creatures. We're gonna make mistakes every single, and then we own those, and then we're transparent around it. And once again, going back to the trust factor, it's such a huge part around being an inspiring leader, and building that trust and being authentic around. So in terms of taking ownership of our own behaviors. I have another question. They're coming in fast and furious, which is great. So Jim really appreciated your point around infusing positive into the conversation. And then he was wondering, some days it's tough, like some days looking out there. And so how do you approach that? How are you able to remind yourself, or kind of flip that switch to not forget about that? That's been a challenge. He'd love to get your insight, Kevin, on that.
Yeah, that's, I appreciate the question, because not every day, is potentially a positive thing you can point to. So I think for us, again, let's not put too much pressure on ourselves to always find the positive in everything. But the reality is, I'll tell you a story. Years ago, I was when I was at IBM, I won this Golden Circle Award, and it allowed me to fly to Hawaii, of all things, for a week, and I loved that. It was fantastic. But they had a guest speaker there, and he was a photographer, and I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but he's a photographer for the National Geographic at the time, and maybe I'm showing my age there, but it was the story was invaluable. And the story he talked about was, one day he was told of this one place, that the dandelions, apparently just, you could go on for miles, and you can see them, and it would create an amazing photography opportunity, right? So when he arrived there, unfortunately, he missed that window when dandelions, they bloom, and all he had left was a field of empty dandelions, basically. They've lost their color. He had a picture, and I have it in my office. What he did, he had to work hard to find the positive in that. He actually found a way to get under a dandelion, take a picture of it upwards towards the sun, and it's in my office. It created this amazing moment, amazing picture. And what I learned from that story, and I use it a lot in my own thinking, is sometimes you need to crawl under the dandelion to find the positive, because that what you expected was not the case. And so to answer that, I think somebody in the organization has to have that tuning in their mind to find a positive, whether it's a customer win, whether it's the smallest of thing, because it's so easy, and human nature tends to do that, to focus on the negative. We've got to keep finding, even if it's a small thing, it's important to talk about it and try and pull that out in our stories.
Well, and what I love about what you just shared, Kevin, it's around that reframing. And then how do you look at things? And there are multiple ways to look at that field. That story is brilliant. And then it's, okay, so then how can I look at this experience? What are ways through which, how do I shift my lens? It's interesting because it reminds me of research where they say venting isn't that effective. It is not effective. It's when you can chat with someone who's skilled at reframing our approach to things, where it really is beneficial. So I just love that. And to your point, then either ourselves or someone around us has that lens, like, hey, everyone, let's crawl. I'm going to borrow that for sure. Let's crawl under the dandelion to find the positive.
And I think the only thing I've mentioned to that, because as I think about that question, because I think it's a great question, never underestimate the power of humor.
Right.
Because it may not be a positive story, but having a bit of humor in a situation can create a positive environment, even in the worst of situations. So try to find, if it's not a positive thing, is there any kind of, like, oh my gosh, how did we get here? Or what is going on here? Because people don't know me, I tend to think out loud, and sometimes my mind wanders into that humorous piece where, okay, this is like crazy. So I don't think it always has to be a positive instance. It can be, right, is there something here we can just take a step back and say, okay, holy moly, like, is there any humor in what the hell we're dealing with here, even though in many cases you're dealing with some pretty serious stuff. So that's the only other comment I'd make on that one.
And I love it. And I'll admit my own bias, because as a Newfoundlander, that's something that we're
that's why we love Newfoundlanders. That's what we love Newfoundlanders for, right? It's just there's no bad discussion with a Newfoundlander, Craig, right? There's always some positives in there, and there's always some humor, and I think we can all learn from that for sure. There's a great example of a cultural thing you'd never want to change.
Right. Oh, well, thanks. Yeah, I love being from Newfoundland. Everywhere I go, I make sure that's one of the first things that I share. So, have another question. So Leo was wondering, has the pandemic impacted Calian's priorities as a corporate citizen headquartered in Ottawa? So the city has gone through a lot of changes over the last 31 years, and so there are some challenges between haves and have-nots. So how does Calian see its role in that domain?
Yeah, great question. And I kind of see it in two lights. I see it from a Calian perspective, and I see it as Kevin Ford, CEO of Calian perspective. So, maybe I'll start with the company. So we've been trying to find ways to support communities. You know, we've got our own campaigns we run between United Way. We've given donations to some of the fundraising for the Ottawa Hospital, for example, in Ottawa for some of the PPE equipment initially when they came out of the blocks and saying we got some challenges here. So we're trying to find opportunities across our communities to give back. We also, based on what we do with our healthcare business, we've actually been able to contribute to putting our shoulder into this. You know, we've done work with Northern Nursing now, with Nunavut, Northern Ontario. We're actually named one day in the Ontario update by General Hillier that, you know, some Calian folks were going to be heading up north for vaccination. So we were also trying to connect what we do to help support the relief efforts, either vaccinations, testing, those type things, and connecting that capability to organizations that need that help. You know, from a Kevin Ford perspective, I participate serial leader locally with the CEO Council, with the Ottawa Board of Trade. We're trying to ensure that we think as a local community with regard to how do we help those that aren't as fortunate as some companies like ours that continue to operate. How do you find ways? You know, a good friend of mine, John Sicard from Canaxis, talked about, they announced a $250,000 live music piece. So everyone is trying to do something that helps a certain part of the community, and we're trying to do everything we can. And believe me, it's not easy. It's not easy to figure all that out, but I think everyone's doing everything they can to support local, but also support those charities and that are really going to need our help here to get through this.
Thank you. That's a great answer, and thanks for the question. Have another question from Allison, and loved your observation, Kevin, about integrity coming out organically as one of the top qualities, the values within Calian. And considering the context where companies cannot be doing good, and you know, and certainly that comes out in the public, how have you been able to bring people into your organization that embody acting with integrity? Because at times it can seem like that isn't part of the conversation, and business conversation in particular.
Yeah, that's you know, man, you really loaded up the great question people today, didn't you? You know, how do you assess integrity? You know, to me, if you think about your hiring practices, you know, meeting people, talking to people, you know, obviously the reference checks, what are these people like? There's also now the whole social media element of this now, and if people don't think their social media isn't being looked at, whether it's from any type of, it is, you know, people are checking in and just on the tone of things. So I think integrity for me is one, you get an initial assessment, obviously. You know, I met Craig, you know, I've met you once, twice, 3, 4 times. I know you have integrity. And how do I know that? It's not because I've done an extensive research on Craig. There's a gut element of leadership, and there's a gut element of everything we do. People are still people. I remember one time, you know, I was coaching. I've coached hockey for 20 years. I have 4 boys, so I've coached hockey. And I remember one year in my assessment process, I decided to get very mechanical on it. I was going to assess every element of this hockey player: skating, passing, puck handling, blah blah blah. So at the end, I had this mammoth spreadsheet. I had all these evaluators, independent. And I had all these scores at the end. And you know what? It was probably 70% right. The other 30%, my gut knew was, okay, that, you know, Johnny or Sally didn't make the cut on the spreadsheet, but I knew they had the right dynamics to be on this team, on the team that I wanted to build. So my answer to that is the integrity piece is something you will assess, and I know your management team will assess as you go through it. But I think we've all had those moments where we've met somebody, and within 10 seconds, like speed dating, you're going, man, I don't want to work with that person. And you ask yourself, so why is that? That's that gut screaming. Sandra Cote, who leads my IT services group, you know, we talk about that, trusting your gut. And sometimes my biggest mistakes in my career is when I didn't listen to my gut. I let the brain kick in and all the math. Sometimes your gut's screaming at you saying, no, I can't tell you why. this is not the right thing. You probably should run here. And you say, well, no, the spreadsheet's right.
Right.
I think to me that integrity piece is you get that sense from people, from integrity, people that know people, reference checks, those type things. But and frankly, then as you get people on board, it kind of validates who you are. And if you've made a mistake, fix it.
Right.
If you don't have the right people, then fix it. I've been guilty of being. People call me a player's coach, and with my hockey analogy, I've been guilty in my past of giving people too much time to try to get on board or to try to demonstrate the behavior that we need in a company, whether it's Calian or anywhere else. So trust your gut, and integrity is something I think that's that natural instinct. There's another sense in our body. We talk about the 5 senses. There's one other one called, integrity, bull crap, whatever you want to call it, that your gut has got. And as leaders, I think you tune that over time.
Well, and I love the point that you made as well, in terms of that. And if someone is stepping outside of those, and you talked about, and you have consistently discussed how values are so integral to the success of the organization and how you live within the organization every single day. And then when people are operate outside of those values, the importance of taking quick action, because then that protects the integrity of those values and sends a very strong message. And so the fact that integrity comes out, which is essentially, well, we do what we say we will do, I can trust that you're going to follow through. That's so powerful, because when we don't, when we allow those things to happen, those values are totally, it's almost like, oh, well, we say we do this stuff, and then we really do. And I've had conversations with people and where it's, well, we had these values at this time, and then when things get tough, we're gonna go over there. So, and how do you, where values are, they can be easier to follow when times are good, and then in time, how can you ensure that those values stay front and center for you and the rest of the organization?
I think you have to be that shining beacon of the values in the company. Like, if I made decisions that were counter to our values, integrity, commitment, innovation, teamwork, if I was the one that demonstrated those values were kind of guidelines, they're not really things we take for, we don't value those. We don't value our values. Maybe I'll write a book, Value Your Values. Okay, you can't steal that, Craig. Everyone's on. It's on tape. It's on tape.
It's already, yeah. I've got
yeah, you can't do that. You can't do that. That's going to be the next book for Craig. Everyone, value for value. But for me, I think that, and I know my management team. I trust them holistically. They're the ones out there, and then our managers and our staff, the whole kit. Is it perfect? No. There's every day you see things that kind of drift outside your values, whether it's an individual or some situation, and you pull it back in, right? You just make sure that you always course correct, that you demonstrate your values. And to be honest with you, I don't go to work every day saying, okay, today I'm going to demonstrate teamwork, or tomorrow I'm going to demonstrate integrity. I deal with situations daily that challenge that values equation, I would say. And I don't consciously think, okay, I'm going to make the right choice because this is the teamwork thing to do. I think as leaders, we permeate those values. And I think the successful people, frankly, are the ones that still have values-based, whether they understand it or not, are still values-based, because I think those are the leaders people want to work for. And I think those are the people that help create organizations that just sustain long-term longevity, because they're based on the right foundation.
Well, and I love that. And it links me back to one of the comments you made earlier, Kevin, about that authenticity. So if those values are authentic, then to show up it's not something that we have to think of consciously to, well, how do I act? It's something that's a natural expression of who you are. So which makes it a lot easier to do on a day-to-day basis. So I love that connection. Another question, I had a question around this as well. And Lauren was wondering, so how about a big topic these days is employee mental health. And so how do you, within your organization, and as such a large, as you said, geographically diverse, a lot of different areas, how does employee mental health come into the conversation? What have you been doing in that regard?
That's another great question, because this one has been tough. When we're in a non-virtual setting, if Craig and I are running into each other in the hallway every day, I can tell. I'm a big fan of energy, right? So I can tell when Craig's energy is off. And I'm not saying your energy's off, by the way, it's an example. I wish I had your energy. So the challenge I've been finding is being able to assess the energy of that person in a virtual setting. And, you know, what we're seeing now is I'm seeing, you know, initially it was, everyone seemed to be good, but as we're getting on with this, you know, I've been working with our Chief Human Resource Officer, Sue, to talk about, you know, pulse surveys, making sure we're getting some data. We're trying to do things that allow us to, our town halls, you know, we've leveraged now live platforms where people can log in around the world. So we're trying to update our communications infrastructure to make sure, number one, we're having effective communications. And our CIO, Jerry's been doing a great job on that. The second thing is that what the message to our managers is, you need to check in with your staff. And you can't check in with somebody when you've got a Teams call or a Zoom call and you've got 50 people on the call. It's really hard to say, hey, how's Craig doing today? It's a great opportunity if you talk to your managers, work with your team, but checking in with your staff. So check in, hey, how's it going? How are you doing today? And the third piece is look for those signs of things that are not normal. You know, if somebody goes quiet, if somebody does things that are beyond, we just have to really fine tune that. And I don't think we have it perfect, to be honest, at Calian. We're working on it. I don't want to give any indications perfect. We are trying with our pulse surveys. We're trying, we had a night, our spirit crew had a night, we had comedians, virtual comedians, you know, come on and do things. So I think we're all challenging ourselves to think of ways to keep it light, to keep it fun, but recognizing it's not without challenge. So, and if anyone on the call has ideas or things that are working for them, please, you know, through Craig, or I don't know how they do that, through my LinkedIn, let me know if you have things that are working, because I keep pulling my network to say, hey, have you done something that's fun? Have you done something that allows us to assess mental health? So it's not a perfect science, and I think everyone's learning, and I think everyone's trying to do the best they can. So I'm open to any ideas out there that people have that are working.
Well, and thank you for that. Yes, and please use the chat function as you've been doing throughout to share any insights, ideas, and/or questions for Kevin, and to contribute to this conversation. And it's a question that I get asked and asked today as well, in terms of in the spirit of that knowledge sharing. So, what are some things you do, Kevin, to bolster, to maintain your own level of personal resilience as you move through it? What are some of the practices that you found to be really helpful, and maybe even some advice you've received from others where you thought, wow, I'm surprised, and you tried it out and it went really well?
You know, I think that, yeah, that's again another great question, because I think the challenge we're all feeling right now is, you know, my life of getting up in the morning, heading to the kitchen, heading to my office, back to the kitchen, back to the office, back to the kitchen, but, you know, like this whole, like my whole world now was a triangle between my bedroom, my office, and the kitchen. And just endless meetings. Things now that, you know, a 5-second discussion in the hallway with Craig and I. Hey, Craig, I have a quick question on that. Oh, okay, thanks, Craig. Have a great day. Everything now is meeting. Everything now is a meeting. And so I would say for me, number one, and I was talking to a team, and we're trying to figure this out, because man, everything's just a meeting. So we got to, I think, challenge the meetings, challenge the duration of meetings. 15-minute meetings are okay. Right? We got to get better at that. Even at Cal, we got to get better, because again, everything's a meeting. So number one is just trying to deal with my own personal reality that I sit in this chair all day, and that's not healthy, and we got to recognize that. So what are you doing about it? My question to everyone out there: what are you doing about it? You're standing up, you're moving, you're giving yourselves breaks. That's fine. The other piece is you know, the personal health element of this thing. I like to always talk about that. People that know me, you know, I had a major health scare 3 years ago. I remember I was at an Ernst & Young conference last year, and was fortunate enough to win an award of like a entrepreneur for services in Ontario, whatever. And I really do appreciate the award, but it was really a reflection, obviously, of the Calian team more than me. And the theme of the conference was unstoppable. And I love that, because I think, you know, we think of ourselves, we're unstoppable, we're leaders, we're out there, we're unstoppable. And the one thing we're not, though, is invincible. And what I mean by that is that, you know, what I learned 3 years ago is, you know, I thought I was taking care of myself, but I ignored some warning signs. And I think for all of us, just making sure that in this time that you're taking care of yourself, you're taking care of your staff, and then your company, in that order. Because frankly, if you're trying to take care of your company first, don't worry about your staff, don't worry about yourself. Long term, it's not going to work very well. So I think taking care of your health, making sure you're spending time for health is number two. And then number three is just also just being there for your family. Everyone's just trying to do all the family things. So don't feel bad about that. Don't feel bad about the fact that you got to take time away from work. I think of those people that are working at home right now with children. My boys are all grown up. I can only imagine the folks that are sitting there with young kids and everything. I really do feel for them. So finding those mental breaks for yourself, I think are really important as we continue through this journey.
Well, and I love that, and I may, so now I have two books that I'm going to take away. Not just
Okay.
Value Your Values, You're Unstoppable, Not Invincible. That's another
Perfect.
one.
Perfect.
This is a treasure trove of book titles
Perfect.
this morning, and one of the things I really I do want to highlight, because you talked about that self-care and then being behind, on Zoom fatigue, as they call it. And I think really, as you're emphasizing, finding moments to be able, okay, so then how do I break that cycle? And within my own practice, where I'll have coaching calls like walk and talk right on the phone, and going out so you can exercise and engage in a conversation. And so how do we find? I have another executive who I know who they'll be on a treadmill and will participate, right? And while they're doing. And I think you're absolutely right, like finding innovative ways to do it. And the really neat point that you made around, because I think this is crucial and it was eye-opening, had a CEO forum last week with Kim Cameron, one of the top respected organizational psychologists in the world. And he talked about how there are various energies, and it reminded me of what you shared earlier about there's physical energy, there's mental energy and emotional energy. When we use those, they're all diminished, yet relational energy is the only one that actually increases when we use it. And I love your point, Kevin, about that family and friends and community, because it's so important, and we can forget about that and or not pay as much attention, especially in times of crisis. So that message that you shared, so invaluable for every single one of us. Another question, because this pandemic has created opportunities for us to learn about ourselves, about our organizations, and a question I really I'd love to get your take on is, what's been a big personal learning for you through this as you've navigated through, and what's been a big lesson that's come out of this in terms of Calian? What have you learned about your organization?
Wow. Yeah. Well, I think the personal lesson or personal learning is, I don't know if I recognize how much I value human interaction, right? Like I'm a leader that feeds off energy of people. And I can tell you, the technology platform has been a savior in many ways to allow us to continue to communicate. So it's been invaluable that way. But Kevin Ford does not want to be a leader in this type of world. And I was in the office a few times just to do a few things that I need to do, because I'm trying to avoid the office as we have for most of our staff. I was walking through that office, I almost had tears in my eyes, right? Because it's just it's like an empty space now. And you realize, and I realized, that those walks from my office to go get a cup of coffee to just go down to a meeting room, and the interactions I had with people. Hey, how's it going today? How are you doing? Oh, I miss that. So Kevin Ford is really looking forward to the world getting back where interactions, because I feed off it as energy. In a town hall, where I'm talking to a couple hundred people, whatever, on a virtual chat, I do it. But let me tell you, we had to do our AGM as a publicly traded company virtually in February. It's like, oh man, like you do it, but you just know you're missing that connection. And I think hopefully people understand what I'm saying there. So I learned personally, number one, human interaction. Oh man, let me add it again. This whole debate on virtual offices versus non-virtual offices. There's going to be some balance in Calian, because I still want our people to have those chance collisions to get to know each other, the whole kit, because I think you miss that in the virtual world. So that's number one. On the second question, what have I learned about Calian? It's probably something I knew, but man, is the resilience of our team. And I say often, your best business continuity plan is your team. And I have just been blown away by, this isn't, hey, thou shalt take that hill. This is, the team rose to the challenge of a global pandemic. Our results, high record results in a pandemic. We've done 6 acquisitions in this time. We've grown the company. So financially, you'd kind of go, holy moly, like that team's continuing to do the right things. But financial results, yes, I'm proud of them, but I'm more proud of the fact that we've been able to work with our customers to find ways to keep things moving, whether it's implementing ground systems for satellites, healthcare for the military, whether it's running those emergency management exercises or IT and cyber. Like, I am so proud of the team and how they've had to change fundamentally how we've delivered our services and products and innovations to the world. I am blown away by it. And that wasn't a Kevin Ford thing at all. That was our staff saying, I'm going to make this an opportunity to not survive COVID, but to thrive in it.
Right.
That's what I've been amazed with my team, and I tell you, I am so proud of everyone. I sound like a dad, you know, like I'm just so proud of everyone. But I am proud of everyone because I know how hard this is. So that's when that resilience piece, man. I've just been blown away by it because that's not something you lead. You know, you shall be resilient today. They just blow me away by it, and they continue to blow me away by it as this continues. A year later, here we keep going. They keep doing it. So I'm just so thankful for that.
Well, that's wonderful. And another question that's come out is that, so this pandemic has also almost was the ultimate pause button and caused everyone, including business leaders, CEOs, to reevaluate what's happening. And so an ongoing discussion is, what lessons have we learned? So there have been innumerable challenges. What are some positive lessons you think, or what are some lessons that you feel you hope we take moving forward, and or how Calian is going to operate moving forward as a result of this? What has it shone a light on in terms of some positive insights?
Yeah, no, great question. I think for me the first thing that became apparent to me was the essential nature of our services. So everything we do was deemed essential. I can tell you in our strat plan a year ago, 2 years ago, that wasn't on our mind. Like, we were just doing what we were doing, and we were going deeper in what we were doing. So I think the first thing is, as you look at your company and you look at the services and capabilities and innovations, how does it fit in that essential category based on what we see in this pandemic? Because what it did show me is that what we do matters to our customers. Like, it just can't stop. So I think just making sure that we continue to challenge ourselves to, I call it innovation that matters. So let's keep doing that. You know, secondly, the diversity of the company really was a positive. You know, a lot of people talk to me about, hey man, you're pretty diverse. You know, why don't you sell off pieces of it, or, you know, get focused on a thing. I appreciate the sentiment because there is companies that do that and do that very well. But for us, it's the right piece, that diversity of both domestic, global, 4 very distinct segments has allowed us to weather the storm. And if you look at our results over the last year, even though consolidated results have been growing, in some quarters, some parts of our 4-piston engine, I call it, some were down, some were up, but the combination of those 4 pistons were able to continue to sustain growth. So I think the diversity has been really highlighted to me, that's something that's been excellent, both in the context of what we do and where we do it. You know, so I think going forward for companies, it's hard. You know, this is hard. And again, I feel for the folks. You know, my son's a musician. He plays with a band out of Sweden. You know, and they've had to cancel 2 tours now, and that's how they make money. And again, I feel for those industries that can't really pivot to something else. It's what you do. So I'm not saying it's easy, but I think all of us got to continue to look at that diversification, look at the essential nature of what we do, and then frankly move forward, try to evolve your company so that you've got a few fingers in a bunch of different pies, so that you're never really dependent on whether it's a global pandemic or it's a sector that goes through a major challenge. You know, think about the airline industry, that you've got wide customer bases that allows you to ride the waves of ups and downs in one sector or the other.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I can't believe we're almost out of time. This hour has flown by. So this has been wonderful. I do have one more question before I pass it over to you, Kevin, for any final thoughts. Jeremy was, and I think it's just such a wonderful sentiment, said, congratulations, Kevin, on all your extraordinary success. You're an inspiring and humble CEO. Starting out my leadership career, any advice for me about how I should approach things or what I can do to be at my best?
Yeah, you know, that's an interesting question, Jeremy, because I think for me, I still feel like I'm growing. You know, like I think for me, I feel like I haven't reached the epitome of my leadership capabilities. I'm learning every day. So I think that's my first comment is, you know, if you're learning every day, if you're willing to listen, if you're willing to adjust, if you're willing to recognize that you don't have all the answers, that you can do better. So number one, I'd say that just be open to being. It's a constant journey. I'm 57 in August this year. I feel like I'm learning every day still. Like I actually don't think I'm a great leader. Like I just like working in organizations with the people that I work with, and hopefully providing a vision that allows us to be excited to come to work every day. So continuously learn, continuously be open to learn. The authenticity, Jeremy, is so important. I think, especially today. You know, I think about, I'm going to use the hockey analogy again, if you don't mind, Craig, because that'll be your next book, right? You know, I think what you've seen in coaching in hockey, it's interesting over the last couple of years, because this used to frustrate me when I was coaching hockey, and it's been a couple of years, but I was always viewed as the soft coach. You know, I wasn't yelling and screaming at the kids. I wasn't berating them in front of the parents. I wasn't like, you know, like I always thought my job as a coach was to create an environment for that team to be successful. And successful doesn't necessarily always mean how many wins we had. Success to me was that when I saw that player 2-3 years down the road, or 5 years now, in some cases I've seen them they're in the stores now, like these kids are all young men now. They came up to me, they still call me coach. And they talk about a positive experience they had on the team. Not necessarily, most of them, it's not about what we did or what we won. It's something we did as a team that just surprised the hell out of us. And we did it. And that's what the kids remembered. And what we're seeing in coaching now, and what I'm so happy to see finally, is that's being called out, all that negative, you know, stuff. So the second thing, Jerry, just recognize that positive and authenticity, create the environment you want to work in, because if it's a good environment, you're going to attract the right talent there. And the third one is never underestimate the energy it takes to be a leader. And you know, that positive switch, coming to work every day, you know, vision, pace, culture. Remember, vision, you're responsible for the vision of the organization, how fast you're going to run to get out there, and what culture and environment do you want to work in and set as an organization to get on that journey. And if you can continue to think about that, what's my vision? Where do I want to take this organization? What is the pace we're running at? Are we running at 10% growth, 20%? Am I going at 50% growth? What is the pace I want to run this thing at? And how fast can my engine run? Don't overestimate pace and actually your engine, Jeremy, because I've seen too many companies do that. We're going to grow by 50%, but then we only grow by 30, and somehow that's a failure. Don't do that. Don't do that. Too many people get into that trap because it's demotivating. Long term, it's demotivating. Tell people let's grow by 20%, do 30. Everyone feels good about themselves, and next year they'll do 40. Don't fall into the trap of creating targets that are achievable. And then finally, the culture. Be authentic. Be the person that you want to be. Be the person that people want to work for. And you have had work for people, I think probably in your career, you say, man, I'd love to work for that person, but I don't want to ever work for that person again. Digest that. Why do you say that? What was it that resonated with one person, not the other? You can learn from that. And I've been very fortunate to have the opportunity to learn from the best.
Well, and what a wonderful, and thank you. And this is the reason why I've been so looking forward to this conversation, so inspiring. And I love your comment around we're all on not just a leadership journey, a learning journey. And that every day we're learning things, and the more that we're open to that and have that humility and look towards serving others, that is the secret to our leadership success and our personal success as well. So before I just send it to you, Kevin, for the last point, before we close, I do want to let everyone know, and so thank you for being here this morning. Adam Bryant, best-selling author, New York Times columnist. He wrote The Corner Office. His latest book is called The CEO Test. He's going to be joining me at the end of the month, March 31st at 11 a.m. Eastern, to talk about his latest book, and he's always a very inspiring guest. So Kevin, before I sign off, thank you so much. This has been so amazing, so many great comments. Any final words before we close this discussion?
You know, I think the last thing I want to say, Craig, number one, thank you, and thanks to those who are participating, and thank you for the questions, all amazing questions, and I do appreciate it. I think I've had a bit of a passion since my health scare 3 years ago, is that I want to remind people, and I'll leave you with this thought, on your to-do list, because we all have to-do lists, and we all are overachievers, and we all have those to-do lists. I want number one in your list to be, am I taking care of myself?
Mm.
Put that on your list. Because if you don't do number one, all the other ones you'll get done, but eventually that number one's going to bite you. And it almost bit me. I almost died. So I don't want to make that negative. I want to make it a positive. My invincible versus unstoppable. Enjoy your journey. Have some fun with this, the whole kit, but take care of yourself, because frankly, it won't matter if you get to 50, 100,000% growth if you're not here to enjoy it with your family. So take care of yourselves in your journey is my final message.
That's amazing. Well, thank you again. Couldn't think of a better closing for this, and so invaluable advice for everybody. And so thank you again, Kevin, for being so inspiring. Looking forward to seeing people in the future. Take care. And again, yeah, self-care. How are we taking care of ourselves today? Thank you, Kevin, so much. This has been a wonderful opportunity for self-care for me. So thanks for sharing your insights.
Thank you so
Bye for
much,
now, everyone. Talk soon.
Thank you.